This Tuesday, June 9th, 2026, Putin entered a phase of brutal pressure that Moscow tries to hide, but which is appearing within Russia itself. Ukraine has just achieved an impressive victory, attacking some strategic targets inside Russia, while the Kremlin tries to respond with swarms of drones and missiles against Ukrainian cities. It came in explosions in Belgorod, in fires near St. Petersburg, in attacks against oil infrastructure, in drones targeting military locomotives, and in new technologies to shoot down Shahed drones before they reach the cities. Russia still has the strength to cause pain, and it showed that in the attacks against Kharkiv and Shuriv, but the difference now is that Putin can no longer keep the war away from his own home. Moscow is sparking panic, with a new wave of airstrikes, at the same time as it sees Ukraine strengthening its air defenses, putting pressure on Russian logistics and opening a political path in the European Union. The war that Putin wanted to turn into a war of attrition against Kyiv has come back as a burden inside Russian territory, something Putin tries to hide. Why is Moscow losing depth? How did Ukraine turn the tide in the skies and in the rear areas? I'll tell you all about it in a moment. If you like this kind of straightforward and no-nonsense content, consider subscribing, because here we have videos like this every day. In the Belgorod region, near the border with Ukraine, a major detonation hit an ammunition depot and caused secondary explosions, a sign that military material was stored at the site. When an arsenal explodes, ammunition stops reaching the front line. The logistics need to be redone, and Moscow spends more to replace what was lost. Belgorod has become a symbol of the new Ukrainian pressure because the war has entered areas that directly supply the Russian attack. St. Petersburg also appeared at the center of this sequence. Reports pointed to an explosion and fire in an area connected to the arsenal complex, with suspected involvement of chemical material and industrial facilities used in Russia's military supply chain. When a structure like this catches fire near one of Russia's main showcases, the damage affects the security propaganda that Putin tries to sell to his own people. Russia responded the way it has since the beginning of the large-scale invasion, attacking Ukrainian cities with drones and missiles. Kharkiv and Kyiv were hit during the night, with deaths, injuries, and damage in civilian areas. In Kyiv, local authorities reported casualties after a missile attack. In Kharkiv, attack drones hit several locations in the city. Russia's logic remains the same: pressure, abandon the population, wear down Ukrainian defenses, and try to sell terror as a military victory. But this method hasn't solved Putin's problem. Moscow is also preparing new waves of air attacks. The warning in Kyiv is that Russia is trying to combine drones and missiles for a larger offensive in the coming days, repeating the tactic of saturating the Ukrainian defense. Shahed drones are launched in large numbers to force Ukraine to spend ammunition, move teams, and open gaps for heavier missiles. The difference is that Kyiv is evolving quickly. This changes the cost of the war. That's where Ukraine turns the tables in the sky. Ukrainian air defense mixes large batteries, old weapons, radars, mobile teams, interceptor drones, and guidance software. Russia tries to win by sheer volume, but Kyiv tries to respond with adaptation. If this technology scales up, Russian swarms may continue to be intimidating, but they will face a cheaper, more flexible, and harder to exhaust defense. Another factor that increased the political weight of the crisis was the car explosion in Moscow involving a high-ranking Russian official, according to Russian and Ukrainian channels. The name and circumstances were still under investigation, so the case needs to be handled with caution. Even so, the political impact is clear. When figures within the military establishment feel exposed within the Russian capital itself, the war starts to affect the command psychologically and undermines the sense of protection among the military elite. There was also information circulating about a possible Ukrainian attack with F-16 fighter jets against an airbase near Taganrog in the Rostov region. If confirmed, it would indicate greater boldness from the Ukrainian Air Force and Russia's difficulty in protecting sensitive facilities related to air support on the southern front. The war against Russian fuel has also gained momentum. The Novoshakhtinsky refinery in the Rostov region was hit by Neptune missiles at the end of May, and the Ukrainian Navy confirmed damage to important processing units. Fuel is the lifeblood of logistics. Tanks, trucks, generators, aircraft, trains, and convoys depend on it. When refineries, oil depots, and pumping stations are targeted, Russia loses speed and the ability to sustain long operations. The spokesperson himself, Dmitry Peskov, admitted to occasional supply problems amid attacks on energy infrastructure. The fuel shortage became more pronounced in occupied Crimea and southern Russia. Putin wanted to turn Crimea into a permanent showcase of the annexation. Ukraine is trying to turn that showcase into a point of attrition. The railways are part of that same package. Ukrainian drone operators hit a locomotive in Russia's Bryansk region near the Ukrainian border used for transporting military cargo. Information released by Ukrainian sources indicated that this was the third locomotive hit in 4 days by drone units. Now, a stopped locomotive can delay ammunition, fuel, parts, and reinforcements. Ukraine doesn't need to occupy a Russian city to cause damage. It needs to cut off the supply route to Russian soldiers. The crisis has also crossed Ukraine's border. A French Rafale fighter on a NATO mission shot down a drone that entered Latvian airspace coming from the Russian direction. Latvian authorities treated the case as an aerial threat, and the incident raised alarm over the war spilling over to the alliance's border. Even with the explanation involving Russian electronic interference diverting drones, the result was tension and strain, and NATO was forced to act in the skies of a member nation. In the political field, Kyiv advanced. Ukraine and Hungary reached an important understanding regarding the rights of the Hungarian minority in Transcarpathia, paving the way to unlock part of Ukraine's negotiations to join the European Union. Ukraine continues moving into the European structure, while Russia sinks into war, sanctions, and isolation. Zelensky also maintained the diplomatic offensive. He returned from talks with European leaders, spoke with envoys from the United States about efforts to end the war, and met with King Charles III in the United Kingdom. The meeting alone does not change the battlefield, but it reinforces the image that Kyiv continues to receive space, support, and political attention. Russia can still cause destruction. The attacks against Kharkiv and Chuhuiv show that Moscow still has the capability to launch drones and missiles against civilian areas. And Ukraine still depends on more air defense, more ammunition, and more support. But the picture this Tuesday shows an important change. Russia attacks but also takes hits in the rear. Ukraine suffers but puts on pressure. Arsenals, fuel, railways, bases, and diplomacy. Putin started a war to bend Kyiv. Now he sees Kyiv taking the war to the points that affect the Russian machine. Ukraine, in danger, steps up attacks on Moscow's drone and missile capabilities. The difference is that Ukraine, against Russia, needs more air defense, more ammunition, and more focus on the targets that really matter for support. Nos alvos que realmente pesam. But the situation is still about fuel, diplomacy. Ukraine is still in a dangerous situation. Arsenals, bases, diplomacy. That's the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check out the comments for more about Ukraine's danger, pressure, railways, diplomacy. Ukraine. E ao final, dê uma olhada nos comentários para você ficar ainda. Air defense, ammunition, and support.